In 1934, the government told Americans that the worst was over. The banks were safe. Prosperity was just around the corner. Then they raised the price of bread again. Your great-grandmother didn't wait for Washington to fix her dinner table. She fed 8 people on what most families today throw in the trash before breakfast. And here is the part nobody talks about. The families who survived the Depression best weren't the ones with money. They were the ones who never forgot how to stretch a single dollar across a whole week of meals. Number 11 on this list was so effective that food companies spent the next 40 years convincing you it was beneath you. Number 4 fed entire families on something you pour down the drain right now, tonight, without thinking twice. These 15 tricks didn't disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because somebody figured out how to sell you the expensive version instead. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because what you are about to learn could cut your grocery bill in half. Let us count them down. Number 15, the everlasting soup pot. Your great-grandmother kept a pot on the back of the stove that never fully emptied and never fully cooled. Sunday's chicken bones went in. Tuesday's potato peels went in. The celery ends, the onion skins, the carrot tops everyone else threw away. She called it perpetual soup, and it simmered for days on a wood stove that was burning anyway. Every meal took a little out and put a little back. A family of 8 could eat from that single pot all week, and it tasted different every day. Nothing was wasted because everything went back in. Today, we buy boxed broth for $4 a carton and feel thrifty about it. She made gallons from what we'd call garbage, and hers had more flavor because hers had been building depth for a week. Number 14, stretching meat with oatmeal. A pound of ground beef cost around 18 cents in 1934, and a pound does not feed 8 people. So your great-grandmother did something the meat industry would never advertise. She mixed in oatmeal, plain rolled oats soaked in a little milk, then folded into the meat before she shaped it. The oats absorbed the juices, swelled up, and turned 1 pound of beef into enough meatloaf for the whole table with leftovers for sandwiches. It cost pennies and stretched the meat nearly double. Diners and boarding houses did the same thing quietly for decades. People who grew up on it swear those meatloaves tasted better than the pure meat version we make now, and they were right. The oats kept it moist long after a straight beef loaf would have dried out. Number 13, the water pie. When there was no fruit, no milk, and barely any eggs, there was still dessert. Your great-grandmother made a pie out of water. Water, flour, sugar, a little butter, and a splash of vanilla were poured into a crust and baked low until it set into something that tasted impossibly like custard. The children at the table never knew the difference. It cost almost nothing and put something sweet at the end of a hard week, which mattered more than the calories ever did. A sweet ending told 8 tired people things were going to be all right. Bake it once, and you will understand why an entire generation remembered it for the rest of their lives. Number 12, coffee that lasted 3 times longer. Coffee was a luxury, so nobody wasted a single ground. Your great-grandmother brewed her pot in the morning, then saved the used grounds, dried them on the windowsill, and brewed them again the next day, stretched with a little chicory root she had dug, roasted, and ground herself. Chicory grew wild along the roadsides for free. Mixed with coffee, it made the expensive part go 3 times as far and gave the cup a rich, dark, almost chocolate depth. New Orleans still drinks coffee this way and charges tourists a premium for it. During the Depression, it was simply how a tin of coffee was made to last most of a month. Number 11, powdered milk and the cream that never was. This is the one the dairy industry spent 40 years burying. Your great-grandmother kept powdered milk and learned every trick to make it taste like the real thing. She would mix it the night before, so it lost that chalky edge. She chilled it cold, because cold hides everything. She even whipped a richer batch into something close to cream for the top of a sundae pie. A box of powder cost a fraction of fresh milk, never spoiled, and never went to waste in a house with no refrigerator. After the war, advertisers worked overtime to convince housewives that powdered milk was a mark of poverty. It was not. It was how a family of 8 had milk on the table every single day without a dairy bill that broke them. Number 10. Day-old bread and the art of never throwing out a crumb. Bread went stale. It did not go in the bin. Your great-grandmother had a dozen uses for the loaf nobody else wanted. Stale bread became bread pudding with a little sugar and an egg. It became the crumbs that stretched the meatloaf even further. It became French toast that turned a hard heel into a Sunday treat. It thickened soups and topped casseroles with a golden crust. The bakery sold day-old loaves for half price, and she bought them on purpose by the armful, because in her kitchen, old bread was the foundation of a dozen meals. We pay a premium for fresh and toss the heel. She built whole dinners on what the store had already given up on. Number 9. The bean pot that ran the household. Dried beans were the quiet hero of every Depression kitchen. A few cents bought a bag that fed the family for days. Your great-grandmother soaked them overnight, then simmered them low and slow with a scrap of salt pork or a leftover ham bone, and turned the cheapest food in America into something that filled 8 stomachs and stuck to the ribs. Beans gave protein when meat was a fantasy. They stretched endlessly. A handful more water and a handful more beans, and the pot fed 2 more mouths. A pot of beans and a pan of cornbread was a complete meal, and it cost less than a nickel a head. Today, the magazines call it rustic peasant food and charge you for it. Back then, they called it Tuesday, and it kept a generation alive. Number 8. Eggshells, bones, and the calcium. Nobody bought. Nothing in that kitchen was left unused. Not even the parts we throw away without thinking. Your great-grandmother dried the eggshells, crushed them fine, and worked them back into the garden soil or the chicken feed. So the hens laid stronger eggs and the tomatoes grew sweeter. The bones from every chicken and roast were boiled down twice for broth, and only then did what remained go to the dog or the soil. She understood that a single chicken was not one meal. It was the dinner, then the soup, then the stock, then the garden in that exact order. Modern kitchens see a scrap bin. She saw 4. More uses in everything before it was finally truly done. Number 7. Regrowing food from scraps. Before anyone printed the word sustainable on a label, your great-grandmother was regrowing dinner on the windowsill. The white root ends of green onions, set in a glass of water, grew right back within days. The base of a head of lettuce sprouted fresh leaves. A potato gone soft with eyes was next spring's crop waiting in the pantry. She never bought the same vegetable twice if she could grow the next one from the last. It cost nothing but a sunny sill and a little patience. We throw those exact scraps away by the millions of pounds a year. She turned them back into food, over and over, until the real garden came back. Number 6. Fat, drippings, and the jar that replaced 3 products. Every kitchen had the jar. Bacon grease, roast drippings, every spoonful of rendered fat strained through cheesecloth and seamed on the back of the stove. That single jar replaced butter for frying, oil for the pea, and shortening for the biscuits. Eggs cooked in it, potatoes fried up crisp and golden in it. Cornbread got its whole soul from it. A family that saved its fat never had to buy 3 separate products to do one job. After the war, The vegetable oil companies spent millions telling America that animal fat would stop your heart, and we believed them, and we threw the jar away. We now know the trans fats they sold us instead were far more dangerous. Her jar sat there doing no harm and making everything taste better. Number 5. The garden that fed the table and the cellar. A patch of dirt out the back door was a grocery store that never closed and never raised its prices. Your great-grandmother grew what fed the family fresh all summer and stored the rest for winter in a cool, dark cellar. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and cabbage kept for months in boxes of einder straw. She grew not just to eat in July, but to survive in January, planning the harvest backward from the hungriest month of the year. The garden cost a packet of saved seeds and sweat, and gave back more than any paycheck of that era could buy. A family with a garden and a full cellar ate no matter what the banks or the markets did. And that quiet independence is exactly what made the institutions nervous, because a fed family answers to no one. Number 4. Potato water. And the bread you didn't pay extra for. Here's the one you pour down the drain tonight without a second thought. When your great-grandmother boiled potatoes, she never dumped the water. That cloudy, starchy liquid was liquid gold. She used it to make her bread rise higher and stay soft for days, because the starch fed the yeast better than plain water ever could. She thickened her gravies with it. She stretched her soups with its body and faint earthy flavor. The very water most cooks pour away made her baking better, and her budget stretched further. One pot of potatoes gave her the side dish for dinner, and the secret ingredient for tomorrow's loaf, from something the rest of the world treats as nothing. Number 3. Sugar stretching, and the sweetness from nothing. When sugar was scarce and expensive, your great-grandmother found sweetness hiding everywhere else. She boiled down corn cobs, the ones everyone else burned, into a pale syrup that tasted faintly of honey. She saved every drop of fruit juice and reduced it into spreads. She used half the sugar a recipe called for and let slow cooking coax the natural sweetness out of carrots, onions, and squash. A spoonful of dark molasses did the work of a cup of sugar at a fraction of the price. Where the rest of us tear open a 5-pound bag without thinking, she made a pinch go impossibly far, and her cooking tasted richer for it. Number 2. 1 chicken, 7 meals. A single chicken was never a dinner in your great-grandmother's house. It was a week of dinners. Sunday was the roast, the centerpiece, the one truly good meal. Monday, the leftover meat became a casserole or pot pie, stretched out with potatoes and gravy until it fed 8 again. The carcass went into the everlasting soup pot for a broth that carried 2 more dinners. Even the feet, the neck, and the gizzards went in. By the time that 1 chicken was finished, it had fed 8 people across the better part of a week, and not a scrap had been wasted. We buy a chicken today and call it 1 meal for 4. She bought a chicken and called it the week's groceries. And number 1, the trick that held the entire thing together. The neighborhood that fed itself. The single most powerful food trick of the Depression was not a recipe at all. It was the network. Your great-grandmother traded eggs for her neighbor's milk. She swapped extra tomatoes for an armload of firewood. When one family slaughtered a hog in the fall, the meat that couldn't be stored was shared down the road, because everyone knew next month it would be someone else's turn, and the favor always came back around. No money ever changed hands. The whole street ate because nobody would let a neighbor go hungry. And this terrified both the government and big business, because it proved people could survive completely outside the formal economy. They didn't need the banks. They didn't need the stores or the brands or the credit. They had each other. In the decades that followed, suburban sprawl and consumer dependency quietly dismantled those networks until most of us today couldn't name the family 3 doors down. Our great-grandparents knew their neighbors' children's shoe sizes. Here is my challenge to you. Try one of these this week. Just one. Save your potato water and bake with it. Mix a handful of oatmeal into your next meatloaf. Keep a grease jar on the back of your stove. Boil down a pot of beans and a pan of cornbread and feed your whole family for under $1. I tested these myself. My kitchen has a grease jar on the stove now. I made a water pie last Sunday, and my kids asked for seconds before they knew there wasn't a scrap of fruit in it. I boiled corn cobs down into syrup, and it tasted better than the honey sitting right next to it on the shelf. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to try first. And tell me if your grandparents did any of these, because somebody in your family tree knew every last trick on this list. That knowledge did not die. It just went quiet for a generation. Because these were never just survival tricks. They were hard-won wisdom that entire industries spent a fortune making us forget. Your great-grandparents knew. Now you know too.